Chris Elpy. I'm the Associate Dean of Libraries, and I'm here with my colleague, Jill Gregory, our Associate Director of Scholarly Publishing and Visualization. Putting this in context to say this is one of many workshops the library's been offering. And so today we're down at the bottom here in the pink and using ChatGPT for data analysis and visualization. But this is going to incorporate elements from courses on prompt engineering, on guiding students on using ChatGPT in their research. We're referring you in one case to the idea you might want the workshop that was taught this morning on creating custom GPTs. So it's part of a whole larger ecosystem of learning opportunities. Today, though, the learning objectives we have for you are to understand what data you can import and analyze in ChatGPT, how to figure out what ChatGPT actually knows about data analysis, generate, critique, refine, and output some visualizations using ChatGPT, and then talk about documenting and acknowledging how ChatGPT was your partner in creating analytic and visual outputs. So the workshop today really is agnostic about what ChatGPT version you're using. The strategies we're going to talk about, some of them can happen in the free version if you have an individual paid version. If you're using an enterprise, institutional, or educational version, if there's some things that are limited or described in those ways, we might touch on those. But really, what you're going to cover today, you could do in any version of ChatGPT. All right, so we have to start always with the responsible use of ChatGPT or any AI here at Mount Sinai. There's actually several policies around the responsible use of AI, and we won't go into those here except to highlight a couple of really important things. For course assignments where the focus is students choosing and producing their own analysis or identifying data issues, it's of course not okay to use ChatGPT to do your own exercises and learning activities. We have a legal limitation in our agreement with ChatGPT and OpenAI, which is that we're not allowed to use data sets that include children under the age of 13. That's actually part of the agreement Mount Sinai signed with OpenAI, but it's OpenAI puts that forward out for many of its agreements. And then journals themselves, that many of them do not permit the use of AI for creating. And so if you're intending your output to be used for those journals, then obviously using ChatGPT would not be an acceptable use. The ways that we have found it's good to use it are helping to identify issues with data quality so that you can resolve them. It's another set of eyes for you calling your attention to something you may not have recognized. If you want to explore lots of different chart types quickly and you don't have access to Excel, or you aren't that familiar with all the options in Excel, this can be a good way to say, show me lots of options at once and I can choose from them, and then go and really focus on learning how to do a particular type of thing. And then if you have like lots of questions and you're like, what if I combine this data set with that data set? Or I'm not very good with pivot tables, I need some help doing that. ChatGPT can help you with that. We just really want to emphasize, whether you're using this for your own personal use or for research projects or other areas, please only use data sets where you have permission to use the data. So if you're on team science, like so many of us are at Mount Sinai, talk with the PI, your advisor, your instructor, before you upload and do any kind of analysis on data that's not your own. Okay, so I think I've covered all the responsible use issues. I want to go ahead and move on to, what does ChatGPT actually know? So ChatGPT has been specifically pre-trained on many forms of data analysis. So they're just not leaving it for granted that out of all the text that ChatGPT was trained on, that it's going to figure out how to do data analysis. They actually did specific customized pre-training activities around data analysis, and it has Python code libraries to be able to execute the data analysis. So we'll see several ways how you can have ChatGPT show you what it's doing with its approach. But when OpenAI says, how do you get ChatGPT to explain its approach, it gives you ideas. It says, tell ChatGPT you want to understand its recommendations. Ask it to help tell you what it thinks is notable or unusual that it's finding in the analysis. So it really is about using ChatGPT as a partner who's very good at explaining itself. We have had this conversation with some of our statistical colleagues. ChatGPT does not do math. So the core part of ChatGPT is that it is a language model trained on patterns in text. So it is not going to use, if you are just in the chat, going back and forth with it in a chat and you ask it to do math, whether it's simple math or higher level math, it's probably not going to do that very well. And it's going to make mistakes unless you start asking it to apply certain algorithms or use those external tools like the Python library. A couple of things that I would point out to you, because I am always I must verify everything, is that in the settings itself, and I'll show you where these are when we get into the example, and the settings on the top right, under the general settings, you can tell it to always show the code if it's using data analyst. The data analyst is the Python library coding group. You can just say by default, always show that to me. You can also say, show me follow-up suggestions in the chat. So this is especially helpful for people without that much experience with ChatGPT. You might not know what to prompt it next. It's going to say, here's a typical follow-up suggestion that I want to offer you if you have this turned on. But if you haven't remembered to turn those on in your settings, or you find it annoying to see all the behind the scenes going on, you can also ask it as you're going along. So at the end of the dialogue you're having with ChatGPT, if you look at the bottom of my image here, they usually ask if there's anything more you'd like to do, or if you need more modifications, let me know. And they have this little icon. That icon will launch the analysis window so you can see the code for what it's doing. And so if you don't have your settings on by default, or even if you do have it on by default, but you want to see more detail, you can always click on that little image. Okay, so as I mentioned, the way that ChatGPT works with any data you upload is that it writes and runs Python code to do the data tasks, whether those are merging or cleaning data sets, creating charts, doing what it calls uncovering insights. So you can ask ChatGPT, you can upload 2 spreadsheets that have a common connecting variable or column and ask it to create a pivot table, and then it'll show you the code that it used to join those 2 data sets and create the pivot table so that you can kind of validate what it's doing. For many things, it will take the data you uploaded as a spreadsheet or a PDF, and we'll get to that in a minute, and create kind of an interactive table that it's using to run those scripts on, that you can then make a full screen view of it to follow along and ask questions and use its prompts. And we will show an example here shortly. I'm just going to go through a couple more of these basic things before we move on. So you can import spreadsheets, you can comma separated values, PDFs, JSON. The amount of files and the size of files will vary by what version of ChatGPT that you're using. So in the Mount Sinai chatgpt.edu, which is what I'm going to use to show you in the demonstrations today, I can upload 10 files up to 512 megabytes per file for the analysis that I'm doing. Depending on what kind of day it's having, it might perform better or worse speed-wise with processing that many files of certain sizes. You'll just have to play around with that. Just one caveat here that ChatGPT is technically capable of connecting to Google Drive or OneDrive for files, but if you're a student or a part of the cohort that's using the Mount Sinai educational license, it doesn't allow that connectivity. So you'll have to download the file you want to use and then upload it rather than making any kind of direct connection with those products. And then if you're in a class or on a research team where you want everyone to use the same data set or the same prompts or do something together, that's a really great opportunity to make a pre-trained transformer, a GPT. And as I said, we have a workshop on that. We had one this morning and it's coming up again in April. And Marta can put the link in the chat for signing up for the GPT workshop if anybody is interested. But that's a way to kind of share files and share the prompts you use. If everybody has access to that account, you can be working on the same files together. Okay. So the spreadsheet that we're going to work with today is about student stress, and it's from a publicly open data spreadsheet that was made available through Dryad. And I have the link here if anybody eventually wants to do this themselves. But it's a pretty simple data set, and you see that it has participants, and then numbers to a lot of questions, some total scores, and then it has textual data at the end of it. We will go ahead now and talk about getting it into ChatGPT, and then we're going to show you a video of what it looks like when it works on this data. So you do want to do all the data preparation things you would normally do for good data quality anyway, right? You want to have descriptors headers. You want to avoid acronyms and jargons, one row per participant record. Try not to have multiple sections or tables in a single spreadsheet. It can't process images with information embedded in them in this kind of activity that we're going to do. And then avoid empty rows or columns. So these are all just rules of data, data cleaning and quality upfront anyway. If your data is messy, you can either write prompts for data cleaning, or you can ask ChatGPT to look at your data and see if it's got something that potentially needs to be cleaned. So it's helpful, again, to be that second set of eyes. Today, we're going to assume that there's some experience with prompt engineering, which is kind of writing the tasks to tell ChatGPT what to do. But in case you haven't had a chance to play with prompt engineering yet, this is the guidance from OpenAI. For the regular ChatGPT model, this idea of tell it what context you're in, tell it what task you want, and specifically tell it what kind of output you want. These are the three elements that prompts that have these three tend to do the best. So for us, for the data analysis workshop today, we're going to show you some prompts about showing me alternative analytic approaches, identifying issues in the data, this idea of combining data sets, and these ideas of finding insights. So we're going to show two examples. I'm going to show one and talk you through the video, and then we're going to talk through a few things, and then Jill is going to switch and share screen, and we're going to go through the second example. So in the first one, you're a data analyst guiding a less experienced person about how to analyze the data set. And then in the second one, you'll be somebody who's already really familiar and you just want it to do some of the work for you so that you don't have to do all the work yourself. Okay? All right. So this is exercise one, where we're going to be ChatGPT is pretending to be the guide for a less experienced person who has questions about how to work with their data. And so just to orient you to this screen before we get started, on the top up where that little Mount Sinai logo is and it says temporary, that's where you would get your account settings to tell it you wanted to see those data controls and things that I showed you earlier. Your previous activity would be over here on the left-hand side. You can see a lot of the kinds of things I've been working on, but this middle part is where we're going to engage. So we're going to put the prompt in the place where it says ask anything. And then the plus sign is where we're going to upload the file that we want to work with. And I like to use written prompts that I paste in or type in, but over here you see that you can actually just verbally tell it what you want it to do. So if you're not in a place where you can type easily, you can verbally tell it what you want to do, but you still have to be in a place where you could upload or paste in the data file. So I'm going to run this video and then talk over it while it's showing, because doing live demos just at the time of day is just really hard to predict on it. So we're going to go ahead here. And what I've done is I've hit the plus sign, and now I'm uploading the student stress database that I showed you earlier. And if it looks like it's lagging, it's not that ChatGPT is actually this slow. We've had interesting experiments with the videos that we made and the speed. So it's uploaded the spreadsheet that I gave it, and I've given it that prompt that I showed you. And now I've asked it to explain the benefits and drawbacks of each approach. Don't worry about the fact that it's unable to display a visualization up there now. That's not really an error. I didn't ask it to display anything. So I asked it right now to just talk me through what are possible ways to analyze this data set. Okay, so you can see it's starting to outline possible analytic approaches, what those are, what are the benefits and drawbacks. It's giving you many options for both statistical analysis and textual analysis because the data set had both kinds of data. And it ultimately is asking me, do I want to start with a specific type of data analysis out of those, 6? I could choose from the 6 that it gave me, or I could actually choose something else. And I'm going to give it a minute because I did actually already ask it. So just waiting for it to run through. This is, as I said, the video is working. It's going. And in a minute, it'll show you the subsequent prompt I asked it. So let me be patient and give it a chance. Right. So I asked it to look at the data set, and tell me, 6 options too many. I'm overwhelmed. Tell me which 2 you think are best. One for the numerical data and one for the textual data, right? Because if I'm not experienced, the 6 is maybe too many for me to choose from, right? So it did the inspection and it said for numeric data, sorry, it scrolled down very quickly. For numeric data, it offered me the idea of doing a regression analysis. And then for the textual data, it said, do you want to do a qualitative analysis? And I'm going to take the qualitative analysis out of the video and talk to you about that separately. But to make this simple here, I just asked it to run, I want to do the descriptive statistics first, because we know, those of us in the audience who teach and do data analysis and statistics, you always want to do the descriptives first to see kind of what outliers you have and what is going on with your data. So it ran those descriptive statistics for us and gave us some insight and said, you actually need to clean the data set before you can do any more sophisticated analyses anyway. And I said, okay, please clean the data set, but I want you to give me the clean data set to download to Excel so that I can take it away and work with it in Excel to kind of validate your work. So we're just having this dialogue and it's telling me, I'm having some issues with the data cleaning. There's some things going on. I'm going to try to take a different approach. Any of these approaches, you could click on the little icons to see more about. But ultimately, it said, okay, you know what? I've cleaned your data set. Here it is. You can download it. Okay. And so then you click on that download clean student stress data set. And it pops up, as a download that then you can go ahead and open it. So that was demonstration 1. And now I'm going to go over to the clean data set just briefly, not to get in the weeds for this. You don't really have to notice this, but at a high level, the specifics of what it cleaned, we're not going to dig into. But there's a whole host of information that just went away in the clean data set. And you can see here that what went away in the clean data set is all of the qualitative textual data that was in those columns at the end. So when it decided, when we said, I want a numerical analysis, the descriptive statistics, it said, okay, you're only focusing on the numerical things now. I'm going to clean that for you. So I don't need this textual data anymore. So you just want to be aware that sometimes it cleans things in ways that maybe you don't anticipate. Okay, so I do want to talk about analyzing text for a minute because, first of all, because I'm a mixed methods researcher, this is something I'm very interested in. We have an active research project on this. But also, I think it's, doing this kind of analysis is very time consuming. And so when people don't have a lot of time, or when they have only themselves and they don't have research partners for comparative coding, qualitative research is often one of the areas where people ask, can I have another set of eyes? Can ChatGPT be a second coder or a friend or a partner for me in that way? So on the plus side, it's very good about generating codes based on commonly occurring words in phrases in your data. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. It can absolutely present themes and sub-themes and example quotes. You can ask it to output your coded data so you can actually check its work and you can get that nice summary table that you want to present. And you probably will feel pretty confident that it captured overall gestalt or overall ideas. But as I'm going to show you on the next slide, it's not going to be consistent about the coding. So you will not trust the actual numbers of times that it showed that a code appeared in the text. And things that are really easy for you to see as a human, it is maybe not going to notice. And if you want to read more about this, this is a really lovely open access paper in Journal of Medical Internet Research about thematic analysis. So these next 2 slides will just show you a little bit of examples on the thematic analysis end. And if anybody is interested in that, I think we could have a separate conversation later. So at the top left, you see the Python code list for I, had asked it to show me its themes and the codes. So it came up with themes like academic pressure, and it applied codes like exams, grades, workloads, deadlines, things that I think would maybe make sense to you. You might agree with it as coding those for academic pressure, or under sleep deprivation, using words like sleep or tired or fatigue, or under financial, money, tuition, debt, expenses. Like this, makes sense to me. So I'm comfortable with their code list. Is it comprehensive? Of course not. So I have the option of kind of making its code list better, or letting it apply its code list and then going from there. But what I want to show you at the bottom is that example of it's not exactly consistent and humans will do it better. So you see that I did this with a couple different versions of ChatGPT at different time periods. And it's very good about recognizing when students talk about exams, I'm going to code it with exams, right? Those are word-to-word matches. Future, lifestyle, and career, that you talked about future. I'm good with coding it as future uncertainty. Financial concerns, though, that this middle one, things about bank loans, clearly as humans, we would recognize that as a financial concern. ChatGPT doesn't get that. It doesn't consistently tag financial concerns for either 33 or in both cases for 34, even though I think as humans, we would clearly be like, these have financial implications. So this is just to say that the overall theme of academic pressure, the overall theme of future uncertainty, the overall theme of financial concerns are all really valid themes. The specifics of, did they exactly code all the things right, where we could provide, here are this many counts or this many students who had this concern, not so much, and we would really have to do a much better job of data validation. These are examples of those kind of table outputs that I mentioned, right? So the theme and sub-theme, so the theme and sub-theme we think are good. The frequency counts, I don't trust them. I need to go back and count the frequencies. But I asked for sample quotes, and when we check those sample quotes, they do typically match up. Although sometimes you get some weird things, like if you look on the right, you see it's got participant 1 cited twice. But you can always go back and validate those in the coded data. So I feel pretty comfortable about the concept of giving it a chance to do some coding, but then ultimately going back and double coding behind it and adding things that I as a human would see that it would not. So this is really my last slide before I ask Jill to start sharing, because we want to show you a little more about when you ask it then to create interactive charts in ChatGPT, what your options are for what happens. So, we had asked it for the descriptive statistics, but beyond the descriptive statistics, we can visualize those statistics, that data in different ways. Yep. So we're just going to continue in the same dialogue, but now we're going to launch the video and launch the prompt where now we're an experienced analyst and we just want it to produce some publication ready charts for us.
Okay, you can see my screen and everything?
Yeah, so go ahead and launch the video and we'll see how it goes. Right, so this is the prompt that we had before. It's essentially, please make charts for 2 charts for me, 2 different designs of charts. Make sure that it follows best practices for publication in the New England Journal of Medicine. I'm super optimistic about my chances, unrealistically, so I know. And I want you to output 2 possible graph options, right? So it starts to make my charts, and it also starts to tell me like what data problems might be interfering with it making the chart. So you can see it says the age data's got some weird things. I want to clean it by removing NANs, and I'll get to the NANs in a minute. And it wants to make that better before it starts on the second visualization, and then it proceeds to tell me, here you have 2 visualizations. What I'm scrolling back and forth for is to see, so you have so that you see that each chart has this now interactive beta option. And so that is where we're going to go live, not go live, but see them in a minute. But ChatGPT can also explain itself. So I was like, what does it mean by NANs? And then it's going to tell me, okay, here's what NANs are and here's why NANs are important. Now that I understand what it was telling me about removing NANs, I can choose, sorry if it's giving people a headache that the scroll is going back and forth. I was like, let me look at the two visualizations and see what I want to do. And by the way, what I'm suggesting it does isn't that I'm saying these are best practices in design or in typos in typing, but I just kind of want to show you what happened. So I'm going to just have it change the font so that you can, I wanted to do something where it would be very obvious to you right away to see what it's doing. Because the point I'm trying to make here is that you can change things by prompting, right? So we changed the font here by prompting. You can also change the prompt by, or change the fonts or colors or other things by using that interactive beta feature. So right now, these are interactive charts and you can download them. You can export them as static images. You can work on them. I'm going to make it bigger so that you can see it because I think like somebody was saying in the chat, it's really hard when you're looking at this on a tiny screen, and I get it. So really, I think we want to encourage you all to kind of explore this on your own. But when you're in an active chart, then those two little like ships passing in the night thing, that's where you can make changes. So here you can see that I'm changing the bar colors and other things. You can also revert back to the, to the static chart you had before. You can do a lot of different things. And Jill's going to talk more about like the things that you can do, in terms of customizations or visualizations. But ultimately, there's a pretty limited set of things that you can do here to make your images better. And so I'm just going to show you one last example, which is really like, I want to change the font, but then I also want to bring these charts out as TIFFs so that I can actually edit them and label them in an image manipulation program that I'm more comfortable with. And that will also be able to be, again, used for publication. Because the defaults here are PNGs, as Jill's going to talk you through on a subsequent slide. So you can absolutely ask it, though, to, again, make some of these changes and then give you files in a different format to output. And so we'll just give it a second to do that so you can see what the output's like. And then I have just a couple summary items about this before I turn it over to Jill. All right, so if you now click on one of those links, and we're going to if you download the chart, you're going to get the chart as you see it now. If you go to the download direct links that they've given you and download that and then reopen it, and we didn't open it here for you, but you would see that it's a TIFF and it's light blue. We just didn't think we didn't think we needed to continue on with the video at that point. All right, so we can go to the next slide, Jill, and we'll just summarize this section. So there's really just two more things to summarize from mine. That you really do need to document and validate your ChatGPT output. It can be useful for learners, right? Like it can summarize and give, drawbacks and benefits in very succinct, user-friendly terms. And you can even ask it, give those drawbacks and benefits for, high school students versus college students versus first-year PhD students. It can kind of calibrate the depth of the dialogue depending on who your learner audience is. If you're a researcher who knows the analysis you want and you can validate the output, it can be helpful. Like if you're on your phone and you have ChatGPT, but you don't have your regular tools handy, like you're not on a computer with the software you typically use or Excel, and you just want to kind of look at a few things, this is a convenient way to do that. 100% ask it to explain its recommendations or results. If you're doing advanced statistical modeling, our colleagues who are statisticians and data scientists, as you really need to have that phone a friend kind of confirmation of statistical modeling, because it can, with the Python codes, it has some very sophisticated things to offer that you may not be familiar with. And the temptation to have it do an analysis that you don't know how to do is great. It's highly tempting. I don't mean it's great to do it. I mean, it's highly tempting to do it, but you need to be able to kind of validate it on the back end. Certainly document all the prompts you use, the model, the date, and if you use it to produce anything, acknowledge your use of it. Here in the library, we have a guide for how to cite your ChatGPT output that we can share this link in the chat. And Jill, if you go to the next slide, I think then really the downloading, taking it to the next level for fine tuning is where I'm going to turn it over to Jill, because we told it to do publication ready for New England Journal of Medicine, But that doesn't mean that it really looked at the instructions for authors about the figure resolution, the font size and type. And Jill and I discovered the hard way that even if you tell it to use a certain size design, a font size or design, that it's confident that it's right, but it actually doesn't know how to make what you want it to make. So you can't always believe what it tells you about fonts. And with that, I will turn it over to our most excellent medical illustrator, Jill Gregory.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. So, as Chris said, my name is Jill Gregory. I'm a medical illustrator here at the school. My official title is Associate Director of Scholarly Publications and Visualization. What we're going to talk about today is using ChatGPT to make visuals. So, to kind of recap part of what Chris said, and then we're going to move on from graphs and charts. Oops, there we go. When you go to download a chart, do a direct download. Like if you click this little button here, it's just going to give you a PNG. There's not going to be a dialog box that comes up or anything. It's just going to directly download a PNG. If you want to download a different file type, then you have to ask it to do that. So similar to how Chris did before, here I said, can you download this as a TIFF file? And it says, here it is. You click on the download, and it doesn't give you, again, it doesn't give you options for resolution and stuff. I think you could actually ask it for that, but the default is 300 DPI, which is what most publishers want anyways. So you would use, so if you need like, any other kind of file besides PNG, if you want a JPEG or GIF or TIFF, you would just ask it to do that, and then it will do it for you. Okay, so now we're going to pivot a little bit and talk about creating images with AI. The first note of caution is proceed with caution, I should say. So here's a prompt I put into ChatGPT, illustration of a human heart. And this is what it gave me. So question for the audience is, what do you see that stands out for you in this image in a positive way, and what errors do you see? And feel free to put your answers in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and say something if you want. And I will pick on people if nobody answers, so somebody please answer. Someone, Marta in the chat, saying the colors are very vibrant. I agree. It's a very eye-catching illustration. Yes, too many vessels coming off of the heart. There's 4 vessels coming off the arch of the aorta in this image, and in reality, there are only 3. There are also some, oops, sorry, I need to stop using my mouse. What's going on? There we go. There's also an unusual number of vessels coming off the side here. So while ChatGPT can create very eye-catching images, as far as anatomical accuracy goes, it's not good. Let's just say that. As Chris said before, ChatGPT can't do math. It also cannot do medical illustration. So here's another example of another issue is with when you want labels in an image. So you can see here I asked it to create an image illustration of the human digestive system. And this is what it came out with. And you'll see that it says it has clear labeling of the major organs. And I think that anyone in this audience, even if you're not an anatomist, knows that these labels are not correct. They are not in the right place. Some of them are not even in English. So if you do create an image in ChatGPT and you want to add a label to it, I recommend adding the label, like download the image and then add the label in PowerPoint or something like that. Do not ask ChatGPT to label anything for you. And here's another example. I thought I'll give it like a softball, ask it to draw the Krebs cycle, which is a very basic foundational idea in science, and you can see what it came up with. Again, it's very confident that it's correct. I showed this to somebody and I was like, why is there an orange slice in here? And like, oh, it's a citric acid cycle. So it has citric acid, oh, citrus, orange, put an orange in. So you can see that ChatGPT is like guessing or making assumptions based on some of the words it finds when it's searching. But for real proper scientific diagrams, you're going to want to create yourself or work with a medical illustrator like me. Another limitation is making iterations. So here's another heart that I made. Again, it does have the anatomical error of the 4 vessels here, but I was just like, you know what? Fine. This is what I'm going to use for now, just for practicing. I would never use this in a real case. but I said, just put a label of any aorta on here, okay? What happens is whenever you ask it to do anything, ChatGPT kind of goes back into the well and finds everything, looks at all of its sources, and then creates a new image. So it can't iterate on an image that already exists. It's going to recreate something different. So here's what it created when I asked it to add a label to the aorta, a completely different heart. And you may also notice that it labeled many different things as the aorta, but not actually the aorta itself. So I hope you're seeing that for making anatomical art or that kind of thing, this is not the way to go. I will now make the plug for, okay, like now if you do need an image like this and you are not an illustrator, what do you do? Good news for you is that there are 2 medical illustrators here at Mount Sinai, myself and Lily Armstrong Davies, and we do create custom art. And I'll have a link at an email at the end. You can contact us. But if you are looking for custom anatomical art that is correct and has labels, you can always reach out to us. So now that I've gone through all the reasons why ChatGPT is not great, what can it do? It's really good for making things that add color to presentations. So here's an image that I said, make something abstract that conveys scholarship, the future, innovation, medicine, healthcare, and it came up with a pretty decent image. You will note that I asked for it to make it 9 by 12. It did not do that. It made it, everything's always this kind of squarish shape. So I'd have to crop it if I wanted to have it actually be 9 by 12. But this would work great for a slide presentation. So if you want to add some visual interest to your slide decks, this can be great. You should also always cite when you put a ChatGPT image into your slide deck, you should write ChatGPT in the corner, like you would cite any other source. And another strength is that really you can ask it to do anything. It can create anything. So I asked it to create an illustration of a rabbit riding a unicorn in a field of sunflowers. And like 30 seconds later, not even, boom, there you go. There's your rabbit riding a unicorn in sunflowers. So if you're looking to create something kind of fantastical or just entertaining, it's great for that. So in summary, for creating images with AI, it's not good for making didactic images. I'd recommend using something like BioRender, the NIH BioArt tool, or working with me to create an illustration. If you do create an image with AI, use a different tool like PowerPoint to add labels, but it is great for creating non-didactic images to liven up your presentations. So beyond rendering, beyond creating art, what can ChatGPT do when helping you to create a didactic visual? This is where it really can be helpful. For brainstorming, creating accessible images, and checking color blindness. So when I say brainstorming, maybe I need to create an image about study design method for cancer research. I'm trying to figure out a way to like lay it out that's not just a simple flow chart. And so I ask it for different metaphors, like what can I do to kind of create an image that describes this process? And so it actually came up with 10. I'm only showing the first 5 here of different visual metaphors you could use. So you could take this idea and then go make the image in PowerPoint or something else or BioRender. So blueprint, tree, pipeline, ecosystem. So it can kind of just get your juices flowing. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to ask it to create that tree analogy. And you can see that it gave me more than I needed. It gave me the tree, but then I also put in a bunch of other stuff like fake charts, and I think that's supposed to be maybe a COVID virus, who knows? So I was like, well, that's not what I want. I want just a tree, right? So I asked it again, can you make just a tree with a plain background? And it did it. So you could download this and put it into PowerPoint and then use the text tool to add things to the branches, put something at the bottom for the base. So it's a way you can kind of like jumpstart creating an image. It's also good for checking accessibility issues. You can create alt text for an image. So alt text is if you're uploading an image to a website or maybe preparing a slide deck that you're going to share with people, for people that have visual acuity issues and can't see well, creating alt text allows that person to, if you're using a screen reader, the screen reader will read the alt text. And so it'll say, this is an illustration of, a human heart with the incorrect number of aortic feeders or whatever. But It will give a verbal description that the reader can then read off, and then the person who's observing the page will know what the picture is of. So it can help you to create alt text. Another thing it can do is it can double check your image. So I uploaded this illustration I made for a grant application for a grant process in Mexico looking at farm workers' exposure to pesticides. And so I uploaded and said, can you give me a description of this illustration? And so I read it over this description and I was like, actually, this description is very accurate, is saying what I wanted this illustration to say. So if you're creating a figure and you're like, am I getting my point across here? Is this something that like a non-expert in the field would understand? You could upload it to ChatGPT and ask it to give you a description. And if in its description it's missing a major component of the image, then you know, okay, I have to go back and work on this some more to make sure that it's super clear that like I'm trying to make XYZ point. You can also ask it to check for color blindness. So this is a grant application from a few years ago, image. And so I asked it to check for color blindness, and it created a simulation of different colorblind scenarios. And I did double check this by using a color blindness checker on the internet. If you just Google color blindness checker, you can find one of these. And it was quite accurate. So you can use this to kind of like double check yourself to make sure that your image will be able to be understood by the widest variety of people possible. So in summary, ChatGPT or AI can be used as a partner in visual creation. So it's more of a supporting role for brainstorming as opposed to creating the image itself. Has some limitations with accuracy and labeling and no ability to iterate, but it's great for brainstorming, checking accessibility, and just kind of like double checking your own work. That's the end of my brief part of this. We're going to go on to some resources and wrap up. So here are resources. ChatGPT, you can actually ask ChatGPT to help you with ChatGPT, which is kind of a weird meta thing. But there's also a couple links here we're going to put into the chat. There's lots of YouTube and other kind of videos online that talks about this. You can get more information. And then we have this is, as Marta and Chris mentioned, this is part of a larger series of workshops on AI and various aspects of it for scholarly activity. We are more than halfway through our series, but there are a few more coming up. So if you are interested in coming to this one again for some reason, you can do that. Also creating custom GPTs and some helping students with the platform. Those are coming up later on this spring. So that's the end of our presentation. We've put here a couple emails, library at MSSM and visualization MSSM, if you are looking to get more information from either Chris or I about data analysis or creating visualizations with ChatGPT or with old-fashioned human hands. Okay, thank you very much for your attention.